Hello, hello, all those beautiful faces. I'm Stephanie Edmonds. Welcome to Teaching Liberty. To live free, you have to think free, and that is exactly what we do here on this show. And tonight, I have with me fellow freedom fighter from the New York Freedom Rally scene. We met out there protesting against COVID mandates, the lockdowns, the masks, the school closures, the the thing that shall not be named mandates, and he's still out there advocating for what is right. His name is Graig, aka Young Mighty Fuzz. What's going on, my brother?
Well, hello, my sister. It's a pleasure to be here. Honestly, I love everything you're doing, and I'm glad that you reached out because it's been a me and you needed to speak. We needed to touch base again, and really just I think we have a lot of similar views. So this is a good starting point.
Yeah, I like to talk to people who have, different views than me, but it's always good to get together with the like-minded people, especially people who I know from real life. We were out there on the ground, and that's how we really connected, right? It's one thing to be keyboard warriors and be like-minded, but we were just talking about how we've taken that action back to our communities and we are working locally on the ground. And I sort of want to do a debriefing of that
Yeah.
New York Freedom Rally movement where, several times a week we would all converge to whatever the spot was, and we would rally, we would protest, we did sit-ins, all sorts of different direct action. And it was an intense time, and in those types of times, you really get brought together, right? You really
100%.
form this bond, and there's been people certainly that have held those bonds together and tried to take them back, but it does feel like since the news cycle has moved on and there is a new crisis. Right now it's the sort of Israel Palestine is the major crisis, and the Ukraine war is it's very war in what national or international politics, and then of course we have the presidential election, and it feels like some of that energy has died out. So I wanted to just sort of get a handle on that, debrief the scene, talk about what you're doing now, and, get into some other issues here. But why don't we start off and you can just tell the people a little bit about who you are? I mean, you're a father, you're an activist, you're a husband, you are a personal trainer. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing. Oh, and you have a podcast, right? People make sure I have
Yes.
everything linked in the description down below. So tell us all about it, and then we'll get into it.
Awesome. Thank you, Steph. I've been working for myself since I'm 17. I've been very big with working for yourself, being independently, financially independent, and that has taught me many lessons that now in this time that we're in has been so pivotal for me personally. I was in music for 15 years. Owned a studio in Queens called the Cuckoo's Nest Recording Studio. I got the pleasure to work with a lot of artists that I grew up listening to. It's honestly been a great lessons learned in the music scene, and you learn people, right? You learn how to deal with people, specifically living in New York, but with music as well. I did personal training for a few years, and then I got into real estate. So
Okay.
that's my personal background. I got into the freedom movement. I knew something was wrong with what was going on. I knew the mandates were coming, kind of like, especially after when the virus happened. Like I knew
Mm.
something was up. Something didn't seem right. I was telling my wife, who is a school teacher like yourself, that yeah, this is gonna come down to the city workers. I already know that they're gonna push this on you guys, and I was just saying it, and people like, I don't think that's gonna happen, right? I don't
Mhm.
think they're going to mandate us. And they did ended up mandating the city workers, and that's kind of where we kind of met, and we got involved with the freedom movement.
Yeah, and I guess I was gonna ask you what motivated you to get out there and do it, because it was certainly one of those intense times where there was a lot of pressure to just stay in your lane, stay in your house, don't ruffle the feathers, just follow the mandates. We'll get through this together. You just got to listen to the government and follow the rules and take your tests and take your shot and just lock down a little bit longer. But it seems like you've been very independent minded from a very young age. And that means you carve your own path, regardless of what else is going on in the world. And I feel like for myself too, once you put yourself in a position where you can't lose, because like losing means literally losing everything, right? Like once I didn't have my job anymore, like I had no choice but to figure it out. And when you're that type of person, it really isn't too surprising that you were one of the people who stood up. Not only did you stand up, but you put your body, your well-being on the line. You got arrested. We staged various sit-ins, right, when they were requiring that card in New
Yeah.
York. A lot of people still aren't actually fully aware of this. I'll tell people, I'll be like, yeah, when the vaccine passport was in place and you had to show it to get into a restaurant. They're like, wait, what? You had to show your card? I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, in New York City, if you were
It was
5
like a different
years
country. It was like
and
a different country
older.
of what was happening in New York City. People weren't affected in other states. It is. You're right.
Literally, people still don't know that. But you were out there with us, and
Yeah.
when the police came in, you said, "You know what? If you aren't gonna feed us because we refuse to show a card, then sure, take us away." Because it makes that point, right? It shows how tyrannical the government is willing to be for something that is so basic, right? Your freedom of movement, your freedom to gather, your freedom to go about your life and conduct business.
Yeah. And it was so beautiful just to stand with everybody though. Like the group that we had, the different walks of life that came together. That's what I remember of that time. Like people that were just, we got to do something. There was no playbook, right? There was no playbook. No one telling you what to do. You think
Right.
getting arrested is the right thing to do, and then you find out years later you're just, kind of just doing it just for grandstand. But it's just that you will not follow orders, that you will show the system, you will show the machine that I will not do what I'm being told to do because this is protocol. That
Mm.
there is a humane aspect to this, and I think that's what really shined in that time with all of us. There was about 50 people that went into that restaurant. Like, and I commend every single person that stood that day. It was honestly humbling. It was a humbling time, my
Yeah.
sister.
And especially, the men, and there were also some ladies who were willing to say, "Okay, fine, if you're just doing your job, then go ahead, just do your job." And I think you guys were charged ultimately with trespassing, right? It's like
Correct. Yeah.
they didn't actually charge you with, like, defying the mandate, because the
Right.
mandate's not it's weird. The mandate's not really a law, it's an executive order versus things that go through city council. So, whatever came of those cases? What happened
They
to
were
people who were arrested?
each there were different times, there were different sit-ins, but specifically the Cheesecake Factory was dismissed. I believe the next day was Applebee's, and that was dismissed.
So they dismissed
And
them. So they arrested you guys, and then and why did they dismiss them? Like, what was the reasoning they gave?
the judge just dismissed it. But in other cases, they actually held them and tried to hit them with a misdemeanor charge. And that's what you bring up a great point, which is they funneled it into trespassing, right? And speaking with some of my friends that are cops, they always say, like, technically, if somebody wants you out of their place of business, and this is where my constitutional stuff kicks in, right? If
Mhm.
someone wants you, if they have a business and they want you out, no matter what the situation is, technically, they should have the right to kick you out.
Right.
There are civil rights that protect these things, and thanks to the giants of past times that we stand on their shoulders that have done this already, right? The Martin Luther Kings and doing the civil
Right, the
rights
public
sit-ins.
accommodations, right? And we were
Right.
saying,
They set
"Hey."
the yeah, they good.
Oh, yeah, I was just like, there's both the religious aspect of public accommodations, there's the medical exemption aspect, which is like, I guess also ADA, right? Your disability rights. And it was sort of like anybody who, if you had religious beliefs, medical issues, or anything else that fell under the protected public accommodations, they were just like, "Nope, sorry, your civil
Right.
rights don't count."
And they had it too. They had an HR thing. If you feel your civil rights have been violated, call this number. It says it right in front. And listen, Monday morning quarterback, what should have happened was we didn't know then. Now we understand, but we didn't know
Mhm.
then. We were supposed to call that number, hold them accountable in their personal capacity, and sue them. and that's how you hit them. You hit them in the pocket, and we probably
Mm.
should have did that, you know. But in the time, like I said, we were writing, we were trailblazing, we were
Right.
making the
It was
pathway.
literally
It was
grassroots. It was 100% grassroots. Most of us had never been on the activism scene before. Of course, there were some who had maybe a little bit of history on the scene, and none of all of us were also under financial pressure at the time. A lot of us had lost jobs. A lot of us were not able to work as much because of not being in person, and a lot of us had to stay home to help teach our kids. So it was one of those times that it's like, yeah, there's a lot of moving parts. So of course, looking back, we can say what we coulda, shoulda, woulda did, but I'm
yeah.
certainly proud of what we did do. And I'm it's awesome to see so many people from that movement not just surviving, but thriving and rebuilding their lives, those who lost their jobs with new careers, and with other people who, were hurt by the mandates too, just like going on, coming back to their community and using that energy locally. So what are some of the things that you're doing now and you see other freedom people doing now that they've brought back locally to their communities? You're in Queens. We have people in all over the different 5 boroughs. I mean, I'm just outside New York City here in Connecticut. So what are you doing? What are some of the other things that Freedom Rally people are doing now that we don't have, medical, well, there's still medical freedom issues to advocate
Sure,
for, but not in the
sure.
same way it was during COVID.
Yeah, so for us, what we got into was holding our elected officials accountable. I got up with some real selfless human beings that honestly have been working a long time, going back to when they had the measles break out in Brooklyn long before the sea, right? Long before the sea. And they've been fighting quietly, not for no fanfare, not for no money, just fighting and trying to hold their elected official accountable. The group was called the New York Du Jour. Ironically, the president of the New York Du Jour is a lady by the name of Jeannie Vega, who I actually grew up with and I live 2 blocks away from. So as we're looking for parking in Queens, I had no idea she's going to Albany. I'm watching UFC fights back in 2020, have no idea what she's doing. And she's actually working with a group of men and women that are holding their elected officials accountable. So once we started doing the protests and the sit-ins, I realized something more had to happen. And I don't want to wait for some president to come save us, whether it be Trump, RFK, whoever, insert official, right? I wanted to get involved. I wanted to get hands on, and we started holding our elected officials accountable. In this process, we found out that there is a process that you don't have to wait every 2 to 4 years to hold your elected official accountable. That there's checks and balances in the republic that you can hold them to, and that's what we're currently doing locally.
Okay, can you give us an example of what are some things that you can do with before waiting for election? What are those checks and balances? What does that look like?
So essentially, when they take the oath of office, and it all comes to the oath, right? You did a video to either today or yesterday about how our country doesn't look like a republic. And I really feel like sometimes, like, I don't talk to you, but we're on the same. Like,
Mhm.
it's so important. We grew up in we grew up in a democracy, right? Let's be honest. The 51 rules over the 49, and it shouldn't be like that because we're a constitutional republic. What happened? And this is why history is important. You were a history teacher, right?
Yep.
Oh, even look at see, we're batting 1,000. So at somewhere down this historical line, we went from a constitutional republic to this corporate democracy, where there's selections, not elections, and we have us fighting with each other, red team, blue team, red team, blue team, and it's really just show, and they keep the control, and they keep pushing the agenda forward, and I think
And keep
everybody.
consolidating their power more and more. Yep.
And you could see it. I believe everybody watching this could see it. So in the constitutional republic, the people had the power. The first thing in the Declaration of Independence, 3 words: "We the people." We the people have the power. It wasn't a government that was an authority over us. It was a government for the people, by the people. We've lost that. There's checks and balances that can happen. We are currently doing this administrative process where we hold them to their oath of office. The first step is we contract the oath of office. We foil for it. We get their oath in our hand, and we let them know. We go to visit them and tell them we now have your oath, and we are contracting as the men and women of our county. And in this process, if they do not uphold their oath of office, we give them a chance to remedy the situation, right? It's kind of like the summonses that cops do. If they don't, we send them another letter, we put them in default, and then if they don't answer, then we bring it in front of a judge.
Okay. And have you had
And that's what
so the oath of office is when they get into office, I don't believe there's a specific constitutional thing that you're supposed to say. I think the only one in the Constitution is the one for the president, that it's like what the actual words are. But
Mhm.
at least according to the Constitution, and then the other positions, like the state can determine what exactly the oath of office says. But when they get into office, right, their first action is they go put their hand sometimes on the Bible, sometimes on some other book, and they say, I'm going to uphold the things that I'm constitutionally supposed to do and according to the description of my office. And so you're
Correct.
saying you take that, or you don't take it, you have to FOIA for it, then you take it, and then you can ask for redress on particular individual items. So is there have what are the things that you're looking at? Like, I mean, there's so many to choose from, right? When you look at what these
Right.
officials do. So what types of things are you asking them to remedy, and what type of success have you had?
So this is obviously new terrain here for. Let me start with this. New York City is its own animal, right? So, like, let's say somewhere in New Hampshire, they're going to get ground a lot easier because there's other components that are involved. But you have to start the process, right? So, what we're looking at is anything that is not in their description of their oath, like what you said. So, I'm not gonna go into anything in particular yet, but that's what we hold them accountable to. So it's not like we don't like them because they're Republican or they're Democrat, or if like a policy that's still within the oath of office. We go after them if they don't uphold their oath, and that's so important, and that's why they take the oath. We we don't get taught that the reason they take the oath is to make sure they uphold our God-given rights. We
Right.
don't even most people don't even know we have God-given rights. They think they have constitutional rights. So I think, and just a small education on the founding of this nation, which is they purposely tell you not to look at on purpose. And you as a historian knows it's probably interesting, right? I mean, the history of this country. It's interesting. It's not boring. It's not, you can pigeonhole it as racist or they didn't do the right thing by the slaves, but there's more involved of not being under rulership like every other empire that's ever been on the
Right.
face of this earth, being
Well,
aligned with
it
God's law.
says right, and I think that, like how you said, it's not that we have constitutional rights, it's that the Constitution is, just cementing the fact that every human being has rights given from God. We're all equal in the eyes of God. And of course, like you said, the
Amen.
failure of the United States was they didn't actually recognize all men, they recognized a very
Correct.
certain subset of men, but I
Correct.
do think that because it's such a strong statement and people realize like, well, we can't say this and then, kind of limit it. We have seen such an expansion of those like of the equality under God. But at the same time, it does seem like some of that has been used as cover, like, oh yeah, like everybody can go out and vote now. Like, good job.
Right. Right. Yeah.
To actually switch things over from more of a republic, right? A constitutional republic where you have checks and balances at all the different levels of government. So you're having both horizontal and vertical checks on power, and they've really consolidated it. So there's like a little like okey doke
Yes.
switcheroo that happens somewhere along the line. But it's good to know that there are so many different tools at our disposal. If you go out there and you start looking and you start digging and you start showing up and you start talking your stuff and knowing what you're doing and following through with actions, that we can try to make up some of this ground.
100%. And that's the thing. Like, we're purposely not told the history, not to make the founding fathers some, like, we shouldn't be idolizing any person, right? It shouldn't be Trump, shouldn't be RFK, shouldn't be the founding fathers. They were flawed men. They're not here now, but we, the people, are here today. God still exists. We are still equal under the eyes of God, our creator. We are the creation, and the power is with the people. And I feel like just because history has passed doesn't mean that we, the people, all the people, can't bring this into fruition today. I think there's too much reliance and idol worship of man to come save us, and we've become in a dependent state. And I think that's what's hurting America today, my sister.
I agree. And, I would at times be frustrated with the medical freedom movement because it did feel somewhat celebrity driven in certain aspects, whether it's from Robert Kennedy Jr., who I'm super grateful in the regard that he funded a lot of the lawsuits that we did. He had created energy and a base that was there and ready for 2020, right? There was a lot of people 2018, 2019, as the religious exemptions were being pulled away for the school vaccinations in Connecticut, in New York, and New Jersey. They successfully fought it off, not in Connecticut, in New York.
Awesome.
So he deserves credit for that, for sure. And then there's also that Highline guy. I forget what his name is. He has the Highline. Isn't that the show out in Texas? He has like the good hair. You know what I'm talking about? I
Oh,
forget
Del
what the
Victory.
Yeah, Del Bigtree. So it's good to have these big national figures because you need to have a broad base and you need people who just want to be there for the vibe, right? They're like, hey, this seems like the right thing to do. I like these people and what they talk about, and they show up. That's great. But you also have to figure out how to mobilize people beyond that, right? How to get people to be more than just the keyboard warrior, and more than just like the retweeter, and more than just like showing up at the rallies where we get the big names, and actually translating that action into the ground. And I think that's the struggle that most movements have, especially when the pressure's not on, right? Like the COVID
Yeah.
regime has fallen. I mean, a lot of the infrastructure is still there, and we can talk about that, but the pressure isn't there anymore, right? So we've seen a lot of people sort of fall away, become inactive, but we've also seen a splintering, I would say, of that coalition. And I want to go
Yes.
back and talk about that before we talk about the splintering, because you had said one of the most beautiful things, and this is something I say all the time about the movement, is it was so diverse. I mean, New York City is just a diverse place to begin with, but when I would show up there, it would be just city workers, people who from around the city that were never political before. We had MAGA Republicans. We had, progressive Democrats who voted for Biden. I remember that one guy who came up was like a socialist.
Yeah.
We had a bunch of BLM people that would come out
Yep.
and march with us. So it was incredibly diverse. And I saw that as our strength. Of course, we would get called, oh, you guys are just anti-science MAGA Trumpers, or, yeah, there's different labels that people try to shame you with
Sure.
when you show up with people who you might not normally find yourself in a coalition with.
100%. That's New York City, right? And that's why I think it's so, I've got the pleasure to stand with other patriots across this country, and nothing's like the New York City patriots or freedom movement or truthers. It's just a different thing, my sister, and growing up here in the heart of New York, I truly believe that we should be at the helm to show how everybody can come together, and freedom is something that every human should strive for. I mean, that's an innate thing. That's a God's
Exactly.
right.
Right.
Like,
And I do want to just comment, our friend Murad here said, the God-given sentiment usually loses those who don't believe in God. Instead, I prefer to refer to those rights as natural abilities that the government
yeah,
is not allowed to infringe upon. And
yes,
yeah,
sir.
I mean, when I say God, I'm certainly not trying to go like all religious on people. And I'm definitely more upon like the source of light. life, the source of life, nature. I believe in the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. It's nature's.
I have it here. I always have it here if
Yes,
you
you
want me
read it. Read it for us real
Yes,
quick, because
yes, ma'am. Yes,
they
ma'am. It would be an honor. It would be an honor.
I have mine back there. I can grab it too if needed.
Of course, when I need it right now, right?
Here, I'll get it. Ready?
Mhm.
I have it here.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry about that. But Murad, you're 100% right, brother. You're 100% right. Nature's law, natural law, universal law, whatever you
Find
choose, I
mine either.
choose God. You can't find it either. Yeah, God's law, natural law, universal law. These are interchangeable. Whatever you prefer. No one has to get caught up with the whole God. I'm a Christian man. I believe you're a Christian woman, right, my sister?
I'm actually Jewish.
You're Jewish, okay? But
Yes.
God, right? God. We believe in the same God, right?
Yes, it says endowed by their creator. That's the words that it uses in the Declaration of Independence. Endowed by their creator. So, and then the other one is laws of nature, and of nature's God. So in the Declaration of Independence, it uses these three terms sort of interchangeably: laws of nature, nature's God, and creator. And I think that, I mean, unless you're just a complete nihilist, I don't know. I'm not really sure what I think that at least most people are agnostic, right? Like not sure, but there's probably some source of life. So you were born, because you were born, you have these rights. And I think that hopefully most people can get behind that without having too much like, oh, well, this God or that God or this religion or that religion.
Yeah.
But I want to sort of talk about, I mean, so 6 months ago in October on 10/7, and now a day in infamy, very much
Yeah.
like 9/11,
Yes, ma'am.
I felt a huge schism go through the freedom movement.
Oh, yeah.
Now, of
Me too.
course, that was an awful day, right? It was a horrible day. There were many innocent people killed, and that's not something that I condone, right? And I think that we should all be against the killing of innocent civilians. And we can have that discussion about the specifics of the situation on another I guess as we get into it. But it was like this bond that we had formed with all these people. We were so tight, and we were like, yes, like this is the new coalition right here. Like this is the liberty, the freedom movement. And it was sort of like leaning a little bit conservative, Republican-ish. And I was like, oh, this is weird. Like the Republicans are the Freedom Party, you know? And a lot of these, especially in New York City, it's a super blue, progressive place. And it felt like everybody was getting it, right? They were like, oh, we should be able to have freedom of speech. I'm a free speech absolutist. America should be who we are focused on. And we need to hold our government accountable. Our government sold us out to big pharma, and they used big tech to censor us. And I was like, yes, people are getting it. And then
Right.
10/7 happened, and all of a sudden the teams realigned, and it was
Yeah.
no longer people standing up for freedom, like this anti-woke freedom coalition versus like these woke kids. It was like, now you either support Israel or you're pro-Hamas, pro-terrorist, anti-West.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're
How did
bringing
you
this up.
see it?
I'm so glad you're bringing this up, and we haven't spoke about this, so this is a hot take, and it's perfect. And then you just told me you are Jewish.
I
You
am
just said, right?
Jewish.
So the fact that you take a step back and you're able to look at this objectively, and I can already hear you look at this objectively. What we got going on is that real things. Listen, what are, I don't want to call it a false flag, but what is the media used for? It's used for take a real situation like 9/11, for instance. They wanted to go into 7 sovereign nations. That's what their goal was. There's generals that speak about it. So what did they do? They had 9/11 playing on that screen every single day and convinced the nation that it's what in America's best interest to go into 7 sovereign nations. That took 20 years, right? So it's the same playbook. If you really look at October 7th, what happened was we watched a girl, a terrible propaganda of this woman being dragged around this area, and that gets your heart going, and you're like, okay, that's it. Let's turn Gaza into glass. Let's kill more people. And to see that it works so easily, not that it wasn't real, that it wasn't happening, but understand it's being shown to you, so you respond this way.
Manipulate you, right? And even
It's
like if you go back to COVID, right? In the beginning, they locked us all down, they traumatized us, they scared us, and then once you're in that fear zone and you've been traumatized, they can basically do anything like
it.
force or trick people into they can manufacture their consent
Correct.
to do massive government programs essentially, right? Whether it's the shot or whether it's a military campaign or whether it's censoring speech online, they manufacture your consent when you are in these scared states and you feel like you're going to lose something, right? You feel like you're going to maybe get really sick. Maybe somebody in your family will die. You're going to lose your job if you don't do this thing. And now it feels like they're like, "Oh, you're going to lose the West." Like they're setting this up as the high values of Western culture versus those barbaric um Muslims in this case, right? Or Easterners in general, because they like to add in the Iranians who are Persian and the Chinese, and of course they get a little bit of Putin in there as well. So yeah, it's for sure the same tactics, and yeah, it's interesting to see how people in the freedom movement could go from like questioning everything that the government was saying, "Oh, it's all propaganda," to then turning around and saying, "Well, this thing that the government wants to do, this policy where they
Right.
require billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars." I think they just did another package today for Israel, I
Yep.
heard.
Yeah.
Um, this time the government
Trust them
is
now.
there for
Yeah,
us,
trust
right?
them now, right? Trust them now. And I think every American should see, whether you're a Republican or Democrat, the government doesn't love you. We have let this government, this authority that became an authority, right? We lost the power as we the people a long time ago. We just let them run amok. They take all your money, like literally all your taxes. You're working, they're taking 30% out of your pay, most Americans' paycheck. Some people more if they make more money, right? And they do what they want with it, and you have no say. You have no say. And these people, they get selected in the elections. Obviously, it's not even just 2020 guys. This has probably been happening forever to make sure they get their guy in. You see these politicians grow out of nowhere.
Right, but
AOC, I know.
even if not though, it seems like once they get into that place,
Yeah,
right, they bring him into the skiff like they did Mike Johnson, because Mike
right,
Johnson had a decent conservative voting record, you know? If you were to look at him before this, and, I don't really pay too much attention to him, and I wasn't thrilled, obviously, when he got in there, and the first thing he did was try to send American money to other overseas.
right.
Um, but it does seem like by all accounts, he when he got voted in, he was doing right by his voters. And then all of a sudden, when he got selected into this special position, they started bringing him into special meetings
Right.
and he
Yeah.
came
You
out
saw
with
changes.
very different opinions.
And there's no checks. The point is, there's no checks and balances, guys. So whether you're mad about it, sad about it, happy about it, there's nobody, there's no we the people holding them accountable. And that's what I really just want to hammer down, that we are not damsels in distress. We are the American people. We're supposed to live in a free nation, a government for the people, by the people. We are not behaving this way. And it's because we're in a corporate democracy. And I think education is needed by all of us. I don't got the answers. Teaching Liberty don't got the answers. We all got to learn together, right? We got to
We
come
got
together.
some of them though, so make
We
sure
got
that you share this out with your friends. Make sure you hit the
yes,
like button. Make sure you
yes,
follow Greg's podcast. Like I said, I have
yes.
his stuff all linked in the description down
Thank
below.
you, my sister. Thank you. Yes, but the truth is, it's like it's really in our hands. We all have a responsibility as Americans to step up. There's no one person that's coming to save us. We, the people, have to come together, and that's how we fix this. That's how we get out of this hole in this country.
And I believe it's local too, right? I don't think that going out and doing a presidential campaign or a congressional campaign is really where you're going to make the difference. Maybe for your
I
state
agree.
legislature, I think that that's a noble place to go. But definitely your even more local offices. New York City, that's a beast of a place. It's like a whole,
It's its own thing. Yeah,
state in
its
its
own
own
machine.
thing, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, here in Connecticut, my town, it's one of the larger places in the state. And we have 120 or 30,000 people here, and my local reps a small area of a few thousand people or tens of thousands of people, and you can actually have a real voice. Like, I could call up my rep right now and she would answer her phone. It's a little late, maybe she's sleeping, but she'll call me back first thing in the morning. Like, you can
That's
really have
awesome.
a personal relationship with these people. And then even beyond politics, like, if politics isn't your thing, fine, right? Start some organization or join some community organization that's doing advocacy on housing, building a homeschooling community, right? Building this alternative place. Like, the goal should be to use as few governmental services as possible, right? Of course, you
Love
still
it.
got to pay your taxes. Hopefully, you figure out how to pay as few taxes as possible.
Right.
But if we aren't giving the government our attention, if we aren't putting our energy there, I really do believe at some point it's going to collapse in on itself, and we have to be there ready with our own to be self-sufficient and to replace their institutions with our own communities.
I love it, and that's you're singing to the choir here with that, and that's the main thing. This is not some anti-government rhetoric that me and Stephanie is speaking here. What we're talking about is taking responsibility as Americans, right? This has
Because what
happened
is
because
the government but we the people?
right, and local is key. You're so spot on. The county specifically, there's a lot of change that you can make immediately if you get involved locally. So, Stephanie, you're spot on, man.
Yeah. And so I wanted to, again, I love the local conversation and all that. I want to sort of switch back over to the conversation about what we see going on in the United States today. So we talked about how the freedom movement kind of splintered in this way. But now we're seeing, more broadly across the United States, and actually it's gone international, is this student protest movement. And now I know there's a lot of people who say it's not organic, that it's being funded by Soros, and there's probably something to that. I'm sure a lot of these groups have a lot of funding, but I've been to medical freedom rallies where people showed up with hundreds of nice signs printed out. I have a couple back here, in fact, that when we went up to the state capitol, we had like 200 signs. Somebody funded that. Right? When we would go to these things, they would come with boxes of pre-printed out flyers and say, "Here, hold this if you don't have a sign." So we did lawsuits. We got funding for that. I just see sort of like a double standard, I think, being applied to these protesters because they're seen as on the other team, right? Because we were just sort of like, oh, those crazy woke kids. And of course, 2020, the summer of love was insane. Like, those were not protests. Some of them were. There were certainly some, but they allowed them to riot. And we see now the way that they're sending the police in, armies of police, even the way that they sent in armies of police on us, right?
Right.
Armies of police on my 5-year-old
Yeah.
son because he was sitting in a restaurant, that they could have
100%.
put those down and controlled them if they wanted to, but they let them go. And now we're seeing, I'm sure, just like every protest movement, there's some agitators, there's some crazies, there's some people who just show up to start trouble. But from what I've seen, these are generally peaceful protests. And it just seems like people are applying a double standard. Like, the Liberty group is now saying, "Oh, these protests, they're different." What are you seeing?
I'm not really there to make that call. I don't know who's behind what's happening at these campuses. I'll tell you this. We are 100% being attacked psychologically, right? I do see the double standard. So let me just say that. I do see the double standard. And like you said earlier, RFK did give his money. He's passionate about this. He's given money on the freedom side. So there is that double standard. I do believe that there's an attempt to bring in a communist movement into this country. Is this that? I don't know. I'm seeing some of the Antifa members that used to fight with us show up there. Does that mean that the whole movement's bad? No, no. Maybe they're just trying to get allies.
Right.
I try to be fair with it. I totally support their right to protest. Um, I know that it's gotten a little kinetic with the cops and stuff like that, but if it's peaceful, we have to respect it. Anybody who does not is un-American. I mean, to be frank.
Yeah, and I think back to the trucker protests. Well, we had our version here in the United States, but those were more, they weren't taking over roads like in the way that they did in Canada. I just
Yeah,
remember in Canada when you had mass amounts of people converge into, I believe it was Ottawa, and they were blocking roads, they were, honking horns, and of course, what was the government's reaction? It was to label them domestic terrorists, ultimately to send cops out to clear them out, arrest them. But even before then, they were hitting them financially, right? They were closing off their bank accounts.
bank
I
accounts.
think
Yeah,
people were donating money to them and they were seizing the money that people were donating to them. So these very heavy handed, um, tyrannical government responses to people trying to redress the government for their basic civil rights. And you saw like Team Reality, as they were called, or like the anti lockdowners, the anti maskers, being cheering it on, right?
yeah.
Saying, yes, this is how people let their voices be heard. And now I see those same people saying, oh, these people, and it's not domestic terrorists, maybe some of them are domestic, they're just calling them terrorists or terrorist supporters or things like that. And they're saying they're being disruptive and they're being,
Yeah.
they don't know, they don't even know what they're talking about, right? Like they just show up because it's the cool thing to do. I don't know. It just feels like a double standard to
You,
me. And
Steph,
you're right. It's
you know what
supposed
I'm
to
why
divide us.
say that. I'm sorry. What'd you
I
say?
just said it seems like a divisive thing, and that's why, like, even for me, it's like, am I doing the right thing by being like, "No, this is the right thing and you guys are wrong?" Like,
Right,
how
right,
how do we actually reach across the aisle and say like, "Okay, yeah, you feel that way, I feel this way, but really it's those guys up in the government." Like, how do
and
we do
that's
that?
you've seen I posted that yesterday. I'm trying to explain to people that if these are paid riots, or they're gonna, let's say they start becoming riots, right? Becomes kinetic, it gets in the streets, it spills into the streets, right? And this is all paid for. The people are coming into cities, ruining cities. We've seen this before. We've at least heard the rumors. I believe because of all the technology that's been put up in the last 5 years, that this is all to hurt us into a police state in New York. If you look on
Mm,
every single corner, we have cameras. There's literal brown boxes that are to tell if what direction a shot went. It's almost their dress for the occasion. All they need is the riot now. All they need is to get kinetic. Where we see this behavior, if you remember, you're from New York, when we had the virus. Before the virus came, they put pharmacies and urgent cares on every corner,
mm,
almost like they knew the virus was coming.
mm.
And now here we are again. We got all a spill of all these people. We got the migrants in here. We got the people fighting on the campuses. We're literally just boiling. And then what do they have in place already? They have the police state ready. They have the technology on the corners.
Didn't they
They're
do
just
a
waiting.
dry run too of some new technology in the subways? Or
R
they had
two
the
D two.
police in the subways or something, and they're gonna
Yeah,
roll
R
out
two
like a
D
new
two.
pass or
Yeah,
something?
R2D2. They had some robot going around, but they also had something where you go through. It could tell the difference between a gun and your phone, and great
Mm.
technology. And they're trying to spoon feed it to us, and they're using fear for you to go, yeah, we need the National Guard here, yeah, we need the technology, yeah, we need this, we need it
Yeah,
for our
we need digital
safety.
ID so we can have free and fair elections, right? We
There it
need digital
is.
ID because we need to make sure no illegals are coming over our border.
Love it. You said
Yeah.
it. You said it. You get it.
I hate to laugh about it. I hate to laugh
Yeah,
about it, but yeah, that's so. I don't want to get caught in the dialectic, right? This team versus that team, and all we
right.
do is go after each other and push each other. So I know I'm not perfect. I'm out here. I'm speaking my mind. I clearly have opinions on issues, and I'm pushing back on people. So I guess my hypothesis is sort of like a way that you can cut through the dialectic is just being consistent issue after issue and not worrying about being on the cool team. Sometimes you're going to be with your friends. Sometimes you're going to be with the communists or whatever they want to call them, right?
Yeah.
But then you'll be back on the other team when the next issue is. And I feel like if you can stay consistent and develop like a reputation for caring about the facts more than you care about what team you're on. I just made a video about how John Adams defended British soldiers who had shot at a mob of colonists. And they killed, I believe, 5 of them. But it was a riot, and one of the colonists was discovered to have actually called for them to shoot, not the commander. And so once all the facts came out about the case, they got off with manslaughter, and some of them got off altogether. And so Adams, obviously, he ended up he was a colonist. He wasn't a fan of the British. His cousin Sam Adams was founder of the Sons of Liberty. And so there was massive pressure for him to just say, you know what? Screw you. You can go fight it out in the court yourself. You'll probably lose, and I don't care because you guys are on that team and I'm on this team. No, he decided to stand up for the truth. He got the British soldiers off. He went on to be one of the most well-respected lawyers in Boston, obviously got chose to be on the Constitutional Convention, and then went on to be vice president and president. And so that's sort of my hypothesis that I'm working on is at times it might feel like I'm forwarding the dialectic, and perhaps I am, but my hypothesis is if I can stay consistent through enough issues, hopefully that will build up a reputation that will steady the ship, that will
I
break the
love it.
dialectic.
We need more of it. We got to follow the truth, no matter where the truth takes us. It's really important. People are on teams, like you said. It's a mind state team. And we see it a lot with a lot of Republicans that think they're patriots. So we got to redefine what a patriot is. Patriot wouldn't be pro cop, pro military, pro going to wars. A patriot was against all that stuff, right? That the origins of that word. And too many Republicans kind of call themselves patriot by name, and I'm going to vote one day, and
Right.
that's my patriotic duty. And it's a little alarming, and all it is, and I'm not making fun of them. I try to help them as much as I possibly can. I try to teach them. It's just lack of education. I love that you gobble up the beginning of this nation, the founding of this nation, because I do too. I love it. I'm in the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist papers right now.
Oh,
Really,
nice.
really interesting stuff.
Yeah, we'll have to talk about it then.
I would love to, man. You could school me, bro. Teaching Liberty.
Oh,
Let's
I'll
go.
probably have to like it'll give me some motivation to re-up on my knowledge. It's been a while since I've dug into those. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's this like what I consider like a false premise that it's like, well, if you don't support our military, or if you don't support our interventionist foreign policy, it must mean that you want our country weak. And I just think that that's totally a bogus premise, right? We can have a strong military and support our military without using it to bully everybody in the
Correct.
world. Our military and can keep us safe without having to go around and bully other countries. And same thing with
100%.
the police, right? Like I think that you don't have to do like the BLM Antifa thing where you're saying F the cops and calling them pigs and all this stuff. Because regardless if you have publicly funded cops or not, you're going to want some security, right? Like the first thing I would do if I was to create my own camp is I would say, okay, who's going to be security, right?
Security,
Like
right.
you need people to keep you safe. However, the way that the state monopolizes power, when they want to come after you, it's going to be the police who they send, right? And the police are just going to be doing their job like we saw in the mandates. So that's why I could also personally never be like back the blue, because I was always hyper aware of the fact that I respect the police. I have police who are my family. I have family members who are in the military. But yeah, you have to
Yeah.
realize that they're going to be the first ones to come down with the state power on you when you step out of line. And again, not necessarily doing something illegal, but doing something that the government decides is politically expedient to call you a domestic terrorist for saying that you don't think that your kid should be taught whatever in school,
And you had a good point. Like it's not that we don't support our military men and women. They're the brave men and women that have been lied to go into these wars, and we have done slaughtering. They have gotten slaughtered, all on these pretenses and lies for global dominance. And we have that. And that means we have a mutual interest to hold this government accountable for that. And the
Right.
same thing for the police. Look, what's the difference between law enforcement and policy enforcers? We have a sheriff and deputies, but we have these police. Who has more power? Like, and it's the sheriffs, and these are things most people don't know. The sheriffs are supposed to protect we the people. They're the last arm for the county to protect the
Mm,
people, where the police are just an extension of the policies from the government, right? So they have total control. That's why they get appointed with the mayor, where if you have a sheriff, your sheriff gets elected. It's a different process because
that's
it's,
so interesting.
yeah, but none of this is taught to us. Like, if you're not
Oh.
looking for it, you won't find it.
Wow. All right. Well, I love what you're doing. I love your knowledge and all of these things, because I used to teach history, but of course, like I taught like the acceptable, like school version of history so that my kids could pass the regents. And I tried to do the best that I could to like make that, to get them what they needed to know, but also make sure that they were asking the right questions to be able to dig further and go deeper. But certainly a lot of these things we don't have the ability to go deeper at that point in time. And when the kids can, when the reading and the math skills are not where they should be, teaching the content becomes that much more difficult. So that's why we need people like you doing what you're doing. Let us know where can people like find you, follow you? What do you have coming up? Shout your stuff up.
Awesome. My podcast is called the Mighty Fuzz Podcast on YouTube. I am on X, Mighty Fuzz Cast, TikTok, Mighty Fuzz Podcast,
For a
IG,
little bit
Mighty Fuzz
longer,
Podcast.
just for a
You
little bit
what?
longer.
Yes, yeah, TikTok's almost out of here.
Oh, get
And
your
I'm also,
VPN. Get your VPN.
yes, 100%. And basically all I did was this, like, I know you keep calling me an activist. I'm no activist. I'm literally your neighbor, right? I'm just the guy next door. I didn't get in this for any other situation except that we just gotta get our hands dirty. I feel we all have a responsibility. I can't be a keyboard warrior and tell people to get involved if I'm not doing it myself. So I made this platform just for people like Teaching Liberty and others in this movement. Everybody in the freedom movement I consider a friend. I have the utmost respect for, is always welcome, as well as anybody across this country that's doing work locally is welcome on the Mighty Fuzz podcast. And I can't wait to have you on, Steph. I really think we're gonna
Yes,
have
yeah,
a
we gotta
good
find a date.
episode.
I gotta come out there and we gotta make that happen. So
Yes.
everybody make sure you're following Graig. Like I said, all his stuff is linked in the description down below. Make sure you've given this video a like. Make sure if you're just finding your way here, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. Got a lot of content coming your way. I do this show every Monday night around 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I have on a lot of amazing guests from all different perspectives. Some I have a lot in common with, like Graig here. Some I don't. And it's always good to get different perspectives. So I hope to see you guys here next time. I hope you're getting out there and putting these ideas into action. And you know what it is. You got to think free, live free, and give all the glory to God.